Bryce's voice echoed across the boardroom, confidently wrapping up my pitch deck, the one I'd stayed up for 3 weekends building. He closed the laptop with a satisfied click, straightened his designer blazer, and gave that humble little nod like he was just so touched by the client's applause. I sat there at the corner of the conference table, lips pressed tight, hands folded in my lap, while everyone shook his hand and congratulated him. The slide with my name on it? Deleted before the presentation even started. My data model that took me 40 hours to perfect? Presented as his team's work. My stomach churned with a sick mixture of anger and disbelief. This was supposed to be my moment. This was supposed to be the project that finally got me noticed by upper management. Instead, I was invisible again, watching someone else take credit for everything I'd built. The client's CEO leaned forward, impressed. "How did you come up with such a unique compliance workaround?" he asked Bryce. Bryce's smirk widened as he shrugged modestly. "Oh, just experience," he said smoothly. 3 hours earlier, I'd rehearsed that exact pitch in my apartment bathroom mirror, wearing my best blazer and practicing my confident voice. "My name is Riley, 29 years old, Senior Operations Analyst at Crawford Financial Group. I'm the only woman on a predominantly male team, and I've learned to play by the book. Always have. I grew up watching my mother work twice as hard as her male colleagues just to get half the recognition. She taught me that if I worked twice as hard and stayed 3 times quieter, I'd survive in corporate America. Keep your head down, do excellent work, and eventually people would notice. But I didn't plan for theft. I didn't plan for someone like Bryce Hammond, the golden boy manager who joined our department 18 months ago with an impressive resume and an even more impressive ability to charm senior leadership. When I first joined his team last year, he seemed harmless enough, goofy, forgetful, always praising my work in private meetings. "You're so thorough, Riley," he'd say. "I don't know what I'd do without you." But today changed everything. Today, I watched him steal my entire project and present it as his own creation. 2 weeks before the pitch, Bryce had appeared at my desk without warning, hovering over my shoulder with his coffee breath and fake charm. I'd been reviewing the compliance section of the presentation, making sure every detail was legally sound. "This clause right here," he'd said, tapping my screen with one finger. "The part about ownership of operational liability remains with senior project sponsor, we should pull that out. Legal won't care about that level of detail." My gut had twisted immediately. I knew exactly why he didn't like that clause. It meant that whoever signed off on the project early would take full responsibility for any compliance discrepancies or legal issues that arose later. It was a safeguard I'd added specifically because our company had been cracking down on managers who cut corners and blamed their teams when things went wrong. Upper management was sick of it. "Just remove it," Bryce had said casually, as if he were suggesting a minor formatting change. "It makes the presentation too cluttered." I'd smiled and nodded like the obedient team member he expected me to be. Then, after he walked away, I'd saved another version of the presentation, one with that clause still intact, buried in my private files. After the pitch ended and the clients filed out, shaking Bryce's hand one final time, he'd patted my shoulder like I was some kind of assistant who'd helped him find paperclips. "Good job on the data entry stuff, Riley," he'd said loud enough for others to hear. Then came the real blow. That afternoon, the follow-up email chain started. Plans for implementation, next steps, timeline discussions, budget approvals. My name wasn't on a single email. No credit, no thank you, no acknowledgement that I'd built the entire framework they were now discussing. Just complete silence, as if I'd never existed. In the break room later that day, co-workers who'd been in the pitch meeting congratulated Bryce enthusiastically. Someone even asked me directly, "Did you even help on that one, Riley? Or was it all Bryce?" I'd laughed it off with a tight smile, made some joke about being behind the scenes. Then I'd gone to my car during lunch break and cried angry tears into my steering wheel. That evening, as I sat at home staring at my computer screen, a new email notification popped up. Meeting invite. Subject line, Quarterly Compliance Audit, Random Selection, Your Project. My heart stopped, then started racing. What Bryce didn't know, what he couldn't have known because he never paid attention to company-wide memos, was that Crawford Financial Group was in the middle of a major compliance tightening initiative. The board had hired an external audit team after a scandal at a competitor company had made headlines. They were randomly selecting high-value projects and reviewing every single compliance document with a microscope. I'd added Clause 6.2 for exactly this reason. It stated clearly that senior management who signed off on operational frameworks before final legal review took full personal responsibility for any compliance gaps. It was my insurance policy, my safety net. And I'd left a perfect digital trail that led straight to Bryce's desk. The audit notification indicated that our project had been randomly selected for full review. They wanted original compliance documents, approval signatures, decision logs, everything. I opened my private folder and pulled up the file labeled, Do Not Delete, Clause 6.2 Addendum, Original Draft. Everything was there. Time-stamped. Dated. With my name clearly listed as the primary architect. I took a deep breath and waited. The audit team sent their first request 2 days later. They needed all original signed compliance documents from the project's planning phase. Bryce replied within an hour, his confidence practically radiating through the email. I've got those, he wrote. We'll send over by end of day. Except he didn't have them. I did. What I had was the original draft, and signed and dated correctly. What Bryce sent was something that made my blood run cold when I saw it. He'd sent a version with my signature on it, forged and backdated to match his narrative. He'd digitally copied my signature from another document and pasted it onto a modified compliance form that didn't include Clause 6.2. The audit team didn't know yet that the signature was fake. But I did. I stared at the document he'd submitted, my hands shaking slightly. Bryce had just committed fraud, and he didn't even realize how serious it was. He thought he was just covering his tracks, protecting his story. Instead, he'd crossed a line that would destroy him. I checked the audit software access logs carefully. According to the system, I wasn't listed as the official approver on the final documents. Bryce was. He'd signed off on everything, claiming full project ownership. Perfect. I didn't rage. I didn't storm into HR with accusations and demands. I'm not that person. Instead, I made a plan. Over the next 3 days, I carefully printed every single version of every document related to the project. Every email exchange. Every timestamp. Every Slack message where Bryce had asked me questions or given me instructions. I organized everything chronologically in labeled folders and uploaded complete copies to my personal cloud storage, just in case. Then I made my move, quietly and strategically. I sent a polite email to the audit team's coordinator. Hi there, I wrote. I noticed our project was selected for review. I was the lead analyst on the operational framework. If you need any process notes or supporting documentation, I documented everything thoroughly throughout development. Happy to help if needed. The response came back within an hour. That would be very helpful, Riley. We'll be in touch soon. They smiled in their email signature. Professional. Friendly. Unsuspecting. The next morning, Bryce sent an email that copied me for the first time in days. It went to the entire audit team. Just to clarify, he wrote, Riley had no involvement past initial data modeling. The strategic framework and compliance structure were developed entirely by senior management. I read it twice. Then I smiled. After that email, something shifted in the office. People started distancing themselves from me, as if failure might be contagious. I became that girl who got left off the big pitch, the analyst who apparently wasn't good enough to be included in follow-up work. One coworker whispered to another near the coffee machine, loud enough for me to hear, she probably pissed him off somehow. Another colleague approached me carefully one afternoon, lowering her voice. Hey, are you okay? I heard you were upset about the presentation thing. I smiled and told her I was fine, that it was just a misunderstanding. But inside, I was cataloging every single backstab, every dismissive comment, every assumption that I must have done something wrong to deserve this treatment. They were all going on my mental list. Evidence at a trial I was building in my head. Then, 3 days after Bryce's clarifying email, my Slack pinged with a direct message. It was from Kyle, a junior analyst who just joined our department 6 months ago. "Hey," he wrote hesitantly. "I think I found something weird in the compliance binder." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" I typed back. "Can we talk in person?" Kyle met me in an empty conference room during lunch hour, looking nervous. He'd brought his laptop and a printed copy of the compliance binder that had been submitted to the audit team. "Look," he said, opening both versions side by side. I was helping organize documents for the audit, and I noticed something strange. He showed me 2 different versions of the same document. One version, the one Bryce had submitted, had no clause 6.2. Clean, simple, exactly what Bryce wanted. The other version, my original, had the full clause intact, clearly worded, and it was signed and dated 3 weeks earlier than Bryce's version. "The metadata on your version is completely clean," Kyle explained, showing me the file properties. Creation date, last modified date, everything matches. But his version? He clicked to show me. The metadata shows it was created recently and backdated. Someone edited it. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Kyle had just handed me irrefutable proof. "Thank you," I said quietly, keeping my expression neutral. "This is really helpful for the audit." Kyle nodded, still looking uncertain. I didn't know if I should say anything, but it seemed wrong. "You did the right thing," I told him. After he left, I sat alone in that conference room for 10 minutes, staring at the evidence. Another nail in Bryce's coffin. Perfect. The audit lead contacted me directly 2 days later. Her name was Patricia, and her email was professional but direct. "Riley, we'd like to conduct a standard interview regarding your involvement in the project. This is routine procedure for all key personnel. Would tomorrow at 2 work for you?" I confirmed immediately. The next afternoon, I walked into the small conference room they'd converted into an audit workspace. Patricia sat with another auditor named Marcus, both of them surrounded by stacks of documents and open laptops. "Riley, thanks for coming," Patricia said, gesturing to a chair. "This is just standard procedure. We're talking to everyone involved." I smiled calmly and sat down. "Of course. I'm happy to help." Then I placed a folder on the table between us. It was labeled, organized chronologically, and contained irrefutable documentation of everything. My original proposals. My research notes. My email chains with vendors. My Slack conversations with Bryce where he'd specifically asked me to develop certain sections. Timestamped screenshots. Version histories. Everything. "I like to keep thorough records," I said simply. Patricia and Marcus exchanged a glance. They spent the next 45 minutes reviewing my documentation, asking careful questions, taking notes. I answered everything factually, without emotion or accusation. Just facts. As I stood to leave, I heard Marcus whisper to Patricia, "Why would he remove that clause?" The office felt different the next day. Strange. Tense. Like everyone could sense something was coming but nobody knew exactly what. Bryce avoided eye contact with me in the hallway. When we passed each other near the elevators, he suddenly became very interested in his phone screen. I overheard him arguing with someone in the stairwell that afternoon, his voice sharp and defensive, though I couldn't make out the words. My coworkers were suddenly polite again, in that careful way people act when they're not sure what's happening. Someone asked if I wanted to join them for lunch. Another person complimented my work on a completely unrelated project. They were hedging their bets, I realized. Trying to stay neutral in case the winds shifted. Nobody knew what was coming, what the audit would reveal, what would happen to Bryce. But I did. I knew exactly what was coming, and I waited patiently for it to arrive. That Friday afternoon, an email went out to several project managers, including Bryce. The compliance audit was expanding. Other high-value projects were now under review. Standard procedure, the email claimed, nothing to worry about. But I saw Bryce's face when he read it. He was sweating. I stayed quiet through all of it. I helped other teams with their projects, answered questions, and maintained my normal friendly demeanor. I played the part of the reliable analyst who just wanted to do good work. People started thanking me again for small things. Thanks for catching that error. Really appreciate your help on this. You're always so thorough. Bryce noticed. I could tell by the way he watched me sometimes, that fake smile plastered on his face while his eyes showed pure panic. He was trying to figure out if I knew something, if I'd said anything to the auditors. One Tuesday morning, he cornered me in the kitchen while I was making tea. Nobody else was around. "Hey, Riley," he said, trying to sound casual. "Can we talk for a second?" I turned, my expression neutral and polite. "Sure, what's up?" He leaned against the counter, attempting a friendly smile that looked more like a grimace. "Look, about the project presentation. I know maybe you felt left out or whatever. But you didn't really write all of it, right? I mean, we all contributed. Let's not make this into a big deal." He laughed nervously. "We're a team, you know." I just blinked at him calmly. "You're absolutely right, Bryce. We are a team." Then I picked up my tea and walked away, leaving him standing there in the kitchen, confused and worried. That evening, I got a notification on my phone. Someone had accessed the shared project folder where I'd stored all my original working documents. The access log showed it was Bryce's account, logged in at 7:47 p.m., long after most people had gone home. I watched in real time as he navigated through folders, clearly looking for something. Then I saw it. He was trying to delete files. Specific files that contained my early drafts and notes. Files that proved I'd developed the entire compliance framework he'd claimed as his own. He probably thought he was being clever, covering his tracks before the audit dug deeper. What he didn't know was that I had backups of everything. Multiple backups, in fact. Cloud storage, external drives, even printed copies locked in my apartment. Every single file was time-stamped and documented. The next morning, I sent a polite email to Patricia from the audit team. "Hi Patricia," I wrote. "I noticed some unusual activity in our shared project folders last night. Several original documents were deleted. I have backup copies if you need them for your review. Just wanted to make sure you have everything you need." Her response was immediate. "Please send those backup copies right away. Also, can you provide access logs showing when the deletions occurred?" I sent everything within the hour. Complete documentation of Bryce's attempt to destroy evidence. Another nail. Another mistake he didn't even realize he'd made. The atmosphere shifted again. The audit team shared preliminary findings with HR, and suddenly people were being very careful about what they said and wrote. HR started pulling old emails, reviewing approval chains, checking signatures against the system records. Compliance issues had escalated from a routine audit to something much more serious. Bryce started working from home more often, claiming he had meetings or needed focus time. But everyone knew the truth. He was avoiding the office, avoiding questions, avoiding the net that was slowly tightening around him. Rumors flew through the department. "Did you hear Bryce might be in trouble? Something about forged documents. I heard Riley's involved somehow." Nobody knew the full story, but everyone sensed something major was happening. Then, on a Wednesday morning, an email hit everyone's inbox. Company-wide, impossible to miss. Subject line: Compliance Training Refresher, Mandatory. Project Leaders First. The message explained that due to recent audit findings across several departments, all project leaders would undergo mandatory retraining on compliance procedures, documentation requirements, and ethical standards. Special emphasis on the consequences of falsifying records. Bryce's name was listed first among those required to attend. The training was scheduled for the following week. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop and allowed myself a small smile. During the next compliance review meeting, I made a subtle suggestion to Patricia and her team. You know, I said thoughtfully, this situation might actually be valuable for training purposes. If you documented what went wrong with our project approval process, it could be used as a case study for what not to do. Patricia considered this carefully. That's an interesting idea. An anonymous case study showing the consequences of improper documentation. Exactly, I agreed. It could help prevent similar issues in the future. HR loved the suggestion. Within days, they'd approved using an anonymized recent incident as the centerpiece of the mandatory compliance training. Of course, nothing stays anonymous in a small department. Everyone would know they were talking about Bryce's project. About my stolen work. About everything that had gone wrong. The case study was being developed by the audit team, using real documentation from our project. They requested detailed records of every decision point, every approval, every signature. And they specifically asked for the original version of the compliance framework, the one with clause 6.2 intact. 2 days later, they made another request that sent shockwaves through the department. They needed a copy of the original signed clause that Bryce had claimed never existed. Bryce's official response: it never existed. That clause was never part of the approved framework. I had the receipts that proved otherwise. I delivered everything to Patricia in an organized digital package. The metadata files showing creation dates and edit histories. The timestamp drafts proving the clause existed from the very beginning. The email where Bryce had specifically told me to remove it. The Slack screenshots where I'd asked clarifying questions about compliance requirements. The access logs showing when he tried to delete evidence. Every single piece of the puzzle, laid out in perfect chronological order. Patricia and Marcus reviewed everything methodically over the course of 3 days. I watched as their expressions shifted from professional interest to serious concern. They consulted with legal. They brought in an IT forensic specialist to verify the digital evidence. They compared signatures across multiple documents. The forensics report came back conclusive. The signature on Bryce's submitted documents had been digitally altered. The metadata-approved files had been backdated. The audit trail showed a clear pattern of document manipulation. When Patricia looked up at me after reviewing the final report, her expression was grave. "Riley, this is significantly more serious than we initially thought. This isn't just poor documentation, this is deliberate fraud." The analysts exchanged glances. I sat quietly, hands folded, waiting. "We're forwarding this to HR for formal investigation," Marcus added. "There will need to be a misconduct hearing." I nodded calmly, as if this was exactly what I'd expected. Because it was. The misconduct hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Bryce walked into the conference room at 2 p.m. sharp, wearing his most expensive suit and his most confident expression. He'd brought a folder of his own documents, probably planning to spin everything as a simple miscommunication. The room was full. Patricia and Marcus from the audit team. 2 representatives from HR, someone from legal. Our department director. And me, sitting quietly in the corner. Bryce launched into his defense immediately, talking fast and smooth. "Look, I think there's been a major miscommunication here," he began. "Riley and I had different understandings of the project scope. She wasn't aligned with the strategic vision, which is why I had to take the lead on client-facing deliverables." He gestured expansively, trying to command the room like he was giving a presentation. The compliance structure was developed through senior management discussions. Riley did some preliminary data work, which we appreciated, but the framework itself was a collaborative effort at the management level. With each lie, I watched sweat begin to form on his forehead. His confident smile became more strained. Then Patricia opened her laptop and turned it to face the room. On the screen was my original document, the one with clause 6.2 clearly visible, dated 3 weeks before Bryce's version, with clean metadata proving it had never been altered. Next to it was the document Bryce had submitted, with my forged signature and backdated timestamps. The comparison was devastating. Mr. Hammond, Patricia said calmly, can you explain these discrepancies? Bryce's face went pale. They asked him to step outside the conference room. I stayed seated, hands folded, expression neutral. With Bryce waiting nervously in the hallway, Patricia laid out the evidence systematically. The forged signature, confirmed by both digital forensics and handwriting analysis. The deleted clause that he'd specifically instructed me to remove, documented in multiple email exchanges. The manipulated timestamps on documents he'd submitted to the audit team. The attempt to delete evidence from shared folders after the audit began. The metadata proving that every major element of the compliance framework had been created by me, not him. The digital forensics are conclusive, Marcus explained to the HR representatives. These documents were deliberately altered. The signatures were forged. The timestamps were backdated. This wasn't an accident or miscommunication. Patricia added, according to our analysis, Riley developed the entire operational framework over a 3-month period. Bryce Hammond removed critical compliance safeguards, took credit for her work, and then forged documents to cover his actions when the audit began. The legal representative leaned forward, her expression serious. It appears someone knowingly altered legal compliance documents and forged signatures on official company records. The HR director nodded grimly. That's grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action. I sat very still, barely breathing, as they discussed next steps. Criminal fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Violation of professional ethics. The words hung in the air like a verdict already decided. 20 minutes later, I saw security quietly arrive on our floor, standing discreetly near the elevators. Bryce was called back into the conference room. The HR director delivered the decision with cold professionalism. Immediate termination for cause. Forfeiture of any pending bonuses or stock options. Mandatory exit interview with legal present. The company reserved the right to pursue further action depending on the full scope of the investigation. There was no yelling, no dramatic confrontation. Just Bryce, pale and shaking, being escorted toward his desk to collect personal items. He pretended to take a phone call as he walked, holding his cell phone to his ear even though I could see the screen was dark. Nobody looked him in the eye as he passed. His designer blazer suddenly looked ridiculous. His confident swagger was gone, replaced by hunched shoulders and quick, nervous steps. His laptop bag was still under his desk, his coffee mug still sitting on his desk calendar. He grabbed a few personal photos and a phone charger, then security escorted him to the elevator. Just like that, he was gone. The department was silent for the rest of the afternoon. People worked with their heads down, nobody quite sure what to say or do. I returned to my desk and continued working on my current project, my hands steady, my breathing calm. 2 hours later, I got a calendar invite that made my heart jump. Meeting request from Christopher Young, the Chief Financial Officer. Subject line, Project Recognition Discussion. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Christopher Yang's office was on the executive floor, a place I'd only been once before during new employee orientation. When I arrived at 9 a.m., his assistant smiled warmly and ushered me directly in. Riley, Christopher said, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of calm authority that came from decades of leadership. He didn't waste time. I've reviewed the full audit report and the HR investigation findings, he began. I want to thank you, privately and professionally, for the integrity you showed throughout this process. I nodded, not quite sure what to say. He continued, the compliance framework you developed has been adopted as our new company standard. Your clause 6.2 specifically, the one regarding ownership of operational liability, is now mandatory in all high-value projects. You may have prevented significant legal and financial exposure for this company. 2 days later, during our department's regular team-wide call, Christopher joined as a special guest. In front of everyone, all the coworkers who'd congratulated Bryce, all the people who'd whispered about me, everyone who'd assumed I wasn't good enough, Christopher made an announcement. I want to publicly recognize Riley for identifying and implementing a critical compliance safeguard that protected Crawford Financial Group from substantial risk. Her thoroughness and professional ethics exemplify the standards we expect from all our team members. My inbox flooded with congratulations within minutes. People who'd ignored me for weeks suddenly wanted to schedule coffee. Former colleagues sent long apologies. Everyone wanted to be associated with success. The official promotion came 3 weeks later. Senior Operations Manager, overseeing a team of 4 analysts. My own office, my own budget, my own projects. Then, 6 months after that, another promotion. Director of Compliance Operations, reporting directly to Christopher. I was leading major initiatives now, presenting to executive leadership, making decisions that affected the entire company. Bryce's old desk, the one by the window with the good view, became mine. I sat there on my first day in the new role, looking out at the city, thinking about how far I'd come. The team respected me now, genuinely. Not because of who I knew or who liked me, but because of the quality of my work and the integrity I'd shown under pressure. Nobody forgot to include me on emails anymore. Nobody dismissed my ideas or talked over me in meetings. Nobody stole my work and presented it as their own. And Kyle, the junior analyst who'd brought me that crucial evidence about the compliance binder? He got promoted too, moving up to senior analyst. I'd personally recommended him, citing his attention to detail and ethical standards. One afternoon, I got an email from a recruiter at a major consulting firm. "We've been following your recent work at Crawford Financial Group," it read. "We'd love to discuss a leadership role. Your reputation in the industry has grown significantly." I smiled at the screen but didn't respond immediately. I was exactly where I wanted to be. Word spread through the financial industry faster than I'd expected. Professional networks talk, especially in compliance circles. Other companies learned what had happened, not from me, but from the natural flow of information that happens when people change jobs and share stories. Bryce's name came up occasionally in industry circles. He'd tried to resurface at a smaller firm, but the background checks caught up with him. His LinkedIn profile, once full of accomplishments and connections, went silent. No new positions. No activity. Just a digital ghost of his former career. I never reached out to him. Never sent a message or tried to gloat. I didn't need to. His absence was its own kind of justice. Several months after everything happened, someone from our legal department approached me quietly after a meeting. His name was Marcus, different Marcus, not the auditor, and he'd been with the company for 15 years. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," he said in a low voice, "but the compliance framework you built? It caught 2 other potential fraud cases in different departments. You probably saved us millions in legal fees and penalties." I thanked him, keeping my expression professional, but inside I felt a surge of validation. The system I'd built wasn't just protecting me, it was protecting the entire company. That's what good compliance structure does. It creates accountability for everyone. Bryce never reached out. Never sent an apology email or asked for a reference or tried to explain himself. Complete silence, as if he'd simply vanished from the professional world. Part of me had wondered if he'd eventually contact me, maybe after enough time had passed that the anger had faded. Maybe he'd acknowledge what he'd done, take some responsibility. But he never did. And truthfully, I stopped waiting for it. I didn't need his apology or his acknowledgement. The silence was its own kind of justice, maybe the purest form. He'd gambled that he could take credit for my work and get away with it because I was quiet, because I was a woman, because he thought I wouldn't fight back. He'd lost that gamble spectacularly, and now he had to live with the consequences. 6 months after his termination, I received an invitation that felt like the final chapter closing. I was asked to speak on a panel at an industry conference. The topic, ethical leadership in high-stakes environments. Me, speaking to hundreds of financial professionals about integrity, documentation, and standing up for your work. The girl who used to rehearse presentations in her bathroom mirror, hoping someone would finally notice her contributions. I accepted the invitation immediately. People sometimes asked if what I did was revenge. If I'd orchestrated Bryce's downfall deliberately, planned every move like some corporate chess game. The truth was simpler and more complicated than that. I didn't destroy Bryce Hammond. He destroyed himself. I just built a system, a compliance framework with proper documentation and clear accountability, and then I trusted that system to work the way it was supposed to work. When he stole my project, I didn't sabotage him or spread rumors or try to ruin his reputation. I just kept receipts. Thorough, time-stamped, irrefutable receipts. When he forged documents and tried to cover his tracks, I didn't have to expose him. The audit process did that automatically because the system was working exactly as designed. When he tried to delete evidence and manipulate records, he was only digging himself deeper because every action left a digital trail. I'd built a framework where truth was documented, where accountability was clear, where fraud couldn't hide. People call it revenge, but revenge implies emotion, anger, bitterness, a desire to hurt someone. What I did was different. I built something solid, something ethical, something that would protect not just me but everyone who came after me. Then I let that system do its job. I walked out of the Crawford Financial Group building every evening now knowing something that Bryce never understood. I didn't need to stoop to his level to win. I didn't need to lie, cheat, or steal credit from others. I just needed to be myself, quiet, prepared, strategic, thorough. The biggest win wasn't the promotion or the recognition or watching him get escorted out by security. The biggest win was proving to myself that I never needed him to succeed. That my work stood on its own merit. That integrity wasn't weakness, it was the strongest foundation anyone could build on. I started mentoring junior women in the company now, particularly those who reminded me of my younger self. The ones who worked incredibly hard but stayed quiet, hoping someone would notice. The ones who had brilliant ideas but were afraid to speak up in meetings. Document everything, I told them during our monthly mentoring sessions. Not because you're paranoid, but because your work deserves to be protected. Build systems that create accountability. Trust the process, but make sure there is a process worth trusting. One of them asked me once, what if someone tries to take credit for my work? I smiled, thinking back to that conference room, to those 3 weekends building a presentation, to standing in the corner watching someone else receive applause that belonged to me. Then you make sure the truth is so well documented that lies can't survive, I said. Revenge isn't rage. It's never needing to look back because you're too busy moving forward.